We begin today the Gemara on Daf Kuf Beis Amid Beis, the second wide line, where it says Tanu Rabbanan. Tanu Rabbanan, we learned a brayse that says the following expression: Halikeach sada b'shem chaverai. You buy a property, but it's in the name of your friend. Ein koifenoisai limkar. We do not force him to sell it to you. Now, the Gemara is going to explain in a moment what the kavanah of this brayse is, but first let's see the translation of the words. Ve'im amaloi. Almanas, if you tell the seller, it's with this condition, then you do force him to sell it to you. So the Gemara asks right away, "My ka'amar, what is the meaning, the simple meaning of what this brayse is saying?" Amar Rav Sheshes explains, "Hachi ka'amar, this is how we have to understand this brayse. Halekeach sada mechaveroi, a person is buying a property from his friend, but he's doing it now b'shem reish galusa. He's buying the property and he's telling the seller that you're selling this property for not for me. You're selling the property to the Reish Galusa, to the head of all the Yidden and Galus. And the reason why he's doing this is because he doesn't want anybody to come and challenge and argue with him regarding the ownership of this property. If people will see that it says in the document that this property is being bought for the Reish Galusa, so then everybody will stay away. Nobody wants to start up with the Reish Galusa. So now, but what's the truth though? Really, he's buying it for himself. Ein kaifin oisai Reish Galusa limkar. We're not going to force the Reish Galusa to sign and write a document to him that really this property belongs to you. But if, however, this person told the seller very clearly that this condition that you're going to write the document that it belongs to the Reish Galusa, but it's only on the condition that the Reish Galusa will then write me a document that really I'm the true buyer. Then we will force the Reish Galusa to sign this document that it's really belonging to you. That's the pshat in the brayse. Now the Gemara will analyze and explain this halacha, both of these halachas, the beginning, the Reish and the Sefer of this brayse. Amamar, so on the Reish of the brayse it said, Halakech sada b'shem Reish Galusa. You bought this property, but you told the seller that you're not buying it for yourself. You're buying it for the Reish Galusa. Ein kaifenoisai Reish Galusa limkar. You don't force the Reish Galusa now to write for you a document that it really belongs to you. Says the Gemara, Meklal, but what you understand from this brayse is the mikne kanyale, that this person did acquire the property for himself. Even though he tells the seller, I'm not buying this property for me. All the seller knows is that this property is being bought by you for someone else. You're just a shliach to buy it for the Reish Galusa. That's the impression that the seller has. But nevertheless, since your intention is, the buyer's intention is that he is buying it for himself, he will acquire it for himself. Says the Gemara, Leme, shall we say, Plige de Bnei Marava. That what it says in this brayse argues with what the Bnei Marava said. Bnei Marava was quoted earlier here on this Amud. People of Eretz Yisrael, they had a shaila on what Rabbi Yechanan said earlier on this Amud. What was the svara they said? The Amri, they said, they were speaking about a case of a shliach. When you send a shliach to go ahead and buy, a person sends a shliach to go and buy for him wheat, and they're buying it from somebody, and this person that they're buying it from, the seller, thinks that he's selling it to this shliach. He has no idea, B'chlal, that the shliach is buying it for someone else. So the Bnei Marava said, who lets know the seller that the true individual that he's selling to is to the Mishalech, the one that sent them. The Bnei Marava were talking about a case where the shliach deviated from what the Mishalech told him. The Mishalech told him to buy one thing, and he went and decided to buy something else. So in such a case, when the seller is selling to this shliach that decides himself what he wants to buy, even though the money that he has in his hands is the money that came from someone else, but nevertheless, the seller has no idea about this. The seller sees you, and you decided what you wanted to buy yourself. So therefore, the Bnei Marava said, how would this kinyan work that the Mishaleach should also get a share in what's being bought over here? If the Mishaleach the seller that is, has no idea that there's someone else that it's being sold for. So over here, in this case as well, this person comes along and tells the seller, what I'm buying is for the Reish Galusa. And here it's sort of the opposite. The seller has no idea that what's being bought is for the shliach. Over here, the seller thinks that it's all being bought for someone else, for the Reish Galusa. So why should you have any acquisition in this if in the kavana of the seller, they're selling it to the Reish Galusa? So Elamai must be that this brayse is saying that even though the seller thinks that they're selling it to the Reish Galusa, but since you are buying it really for yourself, we go according to your kavana, the buyer's kavana. If he's thinking that he's buying it for himself, he will be kainet. Says the Gemara, if this is your question, it's not a question. Because the case here is, the person let the seller of the property know, he even let the Eidim know as well, that you should know, really I'm buying the property for myself, but I'm asking you, nevertheless, write into the document that you're selling it to the Reish Galusa so that people should think that it's being sold to the Reish Galusa. But the seller is well aware that it's being sold to him. But Ella, the Gemara says, according to this pshat of Rav Sheshis, in this Braise, aim is safer. The problem with this pshat is, what it says in the sefer is hard to understand. What does it say afterwards? Almenas, if the buyer told the seller that even though you're writing into the shtar that it's being sold to the Reish Galusa, but nevertheless it's on the condition that then later the Reish Galusa will write me a shtar that it really does belong to me, then kaifin oisei Reish Galusa limkar. We force the Reish Galusa to write this shtar for the buyer that it belongs to him. So the Gemara now asks, based on what are you forcing the Reish Galusa to take this action on your behalf? Amai, why are we forcing the Reish Galusa to get involved there and do this for you? V'leim Reish Galusa, let the Reish Galusa say to this person, Lo yikarai chabina, I don't need your honor, the fact that you're using my name to protect yourself. And v'lei zilasai chabina, and I don't need your disgrace as well, the fact that now you're using me, that I have to be here to your service, to write you a shtar, that really this property belongs to you. What forces the Reish Galusa to do this service for this person? How could the Braisa say, because you made this condition with the seller, so now the Reish Galusa has to play their role for you, even though they didn't ask for this at all? So therefore, Abaye says the pshat in the Braisa is different. Bava Kama, the Braisa is saying like this, and the beginning of the story is the same. Reish Galusa. You guys here, Reish Galusa, as Rashi you see here. The story starts the same. A person buys the property and he wants to buy it in the name of the Reish Galusa, so people shouldn't come and bother him about this. Now, what the Braisa is saying is, we won't force the seller to, after the seller wrote one shtar, that it's written in it, that it's being sold to the Reish Galusa, if the buyer now comes back to the seller and says, I want you to write me now a second shtar, where it will say clearly that it does belong to me, so that later on, let's say the children of the Reish Galusa shouldn't come and argue with me and say that this belongs to them. We're not going to force the seller to write a second shtar for him. But if the buyers clearly made a condition, almenas, that I want you to sell me the property, and the first document you'll write is that it's being sold to the Reish Galusa, but then you're going to write me a second document that it belongs to me, then we do force the seller to write a second document that he's selling it to this person and not to the Reish Galusa. That's the pshat over here. So this is all between the buyer and the seller. So this makes sense. You can make certain conditions between the buyer and the seller. You're not involving someone else, that you're forcing someone else to play their role over here for you in this. What does anyone else have to do with this? So now the Gemara explains the Braisa according to Abaye's pshat. Omamar. So what did the Braisa say here according to Abaye? You buy a property. You tell this buyer, the seller, to write into the shtar that it's being bought for the Reish Galusa. They can't be forced now to write a second document on your behalf. The Gemara pshita. It's obvious. Why should you have the right to go and force them to write a second document for you? Answers the Gemara, I would think, you can say to the seller, Yodis, you knew good and well that this property here I'm buying for myself. And the fact that I was writing into the shtar that it belongs to the Reish Galusa, it's a pnachia ba'alma. Pnachia means I'm just saving it from other people that would come and challenge the ownership of this property. And v'zuzi b'chdi lo yishadina. I'm not throwing out my money for nothing to buy this property for the Reish Galusa. It's sort of an unspoken agreement. It's self-understood that I'm expecting you to write me later on a different shtar that you're selling it to me. So therefore the Braisa tells me that there is no unspoken agreement over here. The Omalei, the seller, can say to the buyer, Inyana avdilach ba'ade'ahud zavnes lebishmei. You have this condition or you have this matter that you can take care of between you and the person that you want me to write this property on their name. Let him go ahead and write you another shtar. You're going to have to deal with the Reish Galusa that now has a document on their name, and they're going to have to take care of this of you, and I'm not going to expect it to write you another shtar for this. What did it say in the Seif of the Braisa, according to Abaye's pshat, that is? If he makes a clear condition with the seller that you're going to write me a second shtar later on, then so you force the seller to write him a second star on his name. Like the Gemara again, Pshita, obviously you made this condition. You can make any condition in a sale, so you made this condition there. And says the Gemara, that over here he didn't really make a clear condition with the seller. It's just that he told Eidim, those witnesses of the sale, that in front of the Meicher, he told them, Chazu d'shtara achrine kabina. You should see that I'm interested after this to have another star. This star now says that it's being sold to the Reish Galusa, but you should know I need a second star. But he didn't make it a clear condition. So therefore I would think to say, the seller could say to the buyer, I thought when you were saying this to the Eidim, you meant to say to them that you're going to get a second star with the name that was sold to you from the Reish Galusa that you wrote their name now in the document. Kamash Malon. So therefore, the Braise is teaching that the buyer could say, the reason why I spelled this out and I said it to the Eidim in your presence when the sale was happening, because I wanted it to be clear. I wanted you to hear this. I need you to write me a second document that this property is being sold to me. I'm not going to the Reish Galusa to get this second document.
Yeah, but that doesn't make it two owners of that property?
No, the sale is it's just a name that they're writing. He's making it clear that it's being sold to him. Like the Gemara already said before, he makes it clear to the seller that he's the buyer and the seller is selling it to him. That's not the...
It goes out to best and it goes out to the world. And there's two shtaros of it.
Yeah.
One says the Reish Galusa and one a day later says it belongs to him.
But the real star is going to be his star. So he's saying how is it going to help him later on? There's going to be two shtaros and it'll become an argument.
Right. These
Okay.
two shtaros are flying around the best.
Yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying. I don't know. Sagt die Gemara, Rav Kahane, Yov Zuzi Akitna. Rav Kahane paid someone money for flax that he bought from them. L'saif, now this flax that he paid for, the way the Gemara understands this right now, the flax was there in the possession of the seller, and he paid for it, and there was a full kinyan, which is usually by metaltalin. You have to make a kinyan of meshicha. But he left the flax that he already bought in the possession of the seller. Now, l'seifa yata kitna. In the end, what happened was the price of this flax went up, let's say, went up to double. So now, zavne marvase, the kitna, the owner, the seller of this flax, went without the permission of Rav Kahane and sold it to someone else for double the price. Now, they didn't really do this with the intention to steal the money. The seller did it with the intention to make this profit now for Rav Kahane. He's going to give him the money now for the double of the price that it is now. Okay, so now the question was, Asal Kamei de Rav. Rav Kahane came to Rav to ask him, Omalei, my Avid, what should I do over here with this profit that I have now from this flax that the seller sold to me? Ezel Eshkol Zuzoi, could I go and take this money that I earned from this flax that he sold for me? Now, what would be the problem here? So as we'll see in the continuation of the Gemara, the reason he's asking this as a shaila is because this could look like ribis. Because you paid, let's say, $4 for this flax. And now you're getting in return back from the seller that owes you money. Instead of this flax that he was supposed to give you, you're getting in return double. You're getting back 8. So it looks like ribis, even though it's not ribis, because this is not in a situation where you borrowed anything. Ribis is only regarding borrowing money. This is something that you gain through a sale, and by a mekkach, there's no union of ribis, but still, it looks like ribis. You paid $4 and you get back 8. So that was his question. Is he allowed to take this? So Rav answered him as follows. Amalei, ki kazavni, if when the seller sold this flax for you, Omri, they told the buyers that they sold it to, Hai kitne de kahanahu. That this flax, it's not my flax I'm selling you Rav Kahane's flax. Then Zilshkel, you can go and take that money. Because you're not taking this money from the seller. The money that you're taking, the people that bought now this flax, they gave this money lechatchila for you. So you paid the seller $4. And now you're getting $8, not from that seller. You're getting $8, which is coming to you directly from those buyers now of this flax. So it has nothing to do with ribis. Doesn't even look like ribis. You're getting the money from someone else, from those buyers. But if the seller did not tell these buyers clearly that I'm selling you the flax of Rav Kahane, then leitishkel, you can't take this money. Because then what happens? Those buyers, they were buying it from this seller that they saw in front of them. They didn't know about any Rav Kahana. So in their mind, they're giving their money, they're paying their money to this seller. And now you, Rav Kahana, is coming and collecting the money from this seller. So then it looks like ribis, because you gave this seller $4 originally for your flax, and now you're getting back from him, not from those new buyers here. You're getting back from him now double for this. So therefore that looks like ribis. So therefore you can't take that money. So the Gemara explains this pshat that we're saying here, in what Rav is saying. What's this based on? Kiman. Based on who is this pshat? Kibnei Marava. This is based again on the same opinion that we brought before. What the Bnei Marava said, that the das of the seller, what the seller is thinking about when he's selling something, matters. The Omri, and before the Bnei Marava applied this in their case, that they were speaking about mi idea lebal chitin sheyakne chitin lebal mois. When you have a shliach that's buying wheat and the seller has no idea that he's buying it for someone else, so the Bnei Marava said, so if the seller doesn't know of this mishaleach, the owner of the money here, the mishaleach, then the sale is just for the shliach, and the Bala Mois is out of the picture. So over here as well, the basis of what Rav is saying, that it depends what the buyers were thinking when they were being sold as flax. Did they know that it's being sold to Rav Kahana? Or did they think, no, it's just being sold to this seller here, and they had no idea of Rav Kahana? This whole distinction that it depends on the das of the seller is based on what Bnei Marava said, that it goes according to the das of the seller. That's what it seems like Rav's pshat is based on. So the Gemara says, no, that's not the case over here. B'chlal, even if you're going to say the pshat this way, there anyways should be no issue of ribis, as the Gemara is going to explain over here, because basically this seller is a gazlan. He sold this flax to Rav, and Rav just didn't get a chance to pick it up yet. And now this guy on his own, could be he wants to do a favor to Rav, he wants him to make the profit of to Rav Kahana, that is, and he wants him to make the profit out of it, but he went and sold this without his permission. So really, this seller here is a gazlan. If this seller is a gazlan, there's no issue of ribis over here. He has to pay you back the full value that it has now, as the Gemara explains. Otu mi of Rav Kahana arba v'shokol tmani. Can you in any way compare this to ribis, that he originally paid $4 for this flax, and now he's taking back 8 from this seller? So it looks like he's getting ribis here. What really happened here? Kitne memelahu de yaker. What happened is he left this flax in the possession of the seller, and now the price just went up to double. And what did the seller do? Migzal gazlua. He's just a gazlan. He went without your permission and he's stealing it and is selling it to someone else. Now, what's the halacha if someone steals something from you? Utnan, the Mishnah says, as we learned before, kol gazlan and mishalman kishas gzela. If you steal something, what's the value that you have to return of this gzela? You have to return the value that it is at the time when you're stealing it. So this seller, at the time when he went without permission to sell this flax to someone else, the price was double. So he has to pay back double of what it was in the beginning. This has nothing to do with ribis. It's his obligation as a gazlan to give you back double of what its original value was, because at the time of the gzela, that's what its value is. So how is this connected to ribis in any way? It doesn't make any difference what the intention of this new buyer is. He knew about Rav Kahana, he didn't know about Rav Kahana. This is the responsibility of the gazlan to pay you back kishas gzela, and I had that more expensive price. So this, anyways, cannot be the pshat in what Rav was saying. So therefore, the Gemara gives a different pshat. Omri, so they explained, Hassam, over there, the story with Rav Kahana, when he bought this flax there was no actual flax here. Amona havoy. This is a case of a trust. When you're paying someone, a person that is a flax merchant, and he has flax that he sells, and you come to him in a time when the price of the flax is cheap, and you tell him, here, I'm giving you in advance for the whole year the price for the flax according to the price that's now. So when you get the flax, you'll give me the flax based on the price today, and then later the price goes up. That's what's called an amana. And then you're going to get that flax according to the price that it is today. There was no kinyan here. There was no meshicha that you have on any flax, because there was no actual flax yet in his possession. So you're paying according to the cheap price now. And now what happens is this flax seller gets now this flax, and he can give the flax itself to Rav Kahana. Instead, what he did was he went and sold his flax to someone else for that higher price that it's now. And now he wants to give the money to Rav Kahana instead of that flax itself. That's the question, are you allowed to take this or not? And the Gemara explains, V'rav l'taimei. Rav over here follows his reasoning that he says in Bava Mitzvah, and the whole sugi of rib is there. Rav says, Oisin amone bepeiris. This kind of a deal that you pay money, and even though the price now is cheaper, and later the price is going to go up, and you're going to get double, could be, of what you paid today, so you're paying the lower price, and you're getting back in return. And this person now owes you. This is done not as a loan, it's done as a mekach, it's done as an investment, but you're getting back double of what you paid. It looks like ribis, even though it's not done as a loan, it's done as a business transaction, as an investment, but it looks like ribis, because you're giving money based on the cheaper price today, and you're getting back double based on the more expensive price later. But nevertheless, Rav said, if what you're getting in return is actual paytis, is fruits, you're not getting in return money, so then because it's derech mekach, it's like it's an investment, and it's also paytis that you're not getting back money, so therefore it doesn't look like ribis, and you're allowed to do this. But however, when it comes to money, if you're giving money to a person and then you're getting back double that amount of money based on the fact that the price went up, so then that you're not allowed to do. So over here, in this case, when the seller sold this flax and now he's giving you back double the amount of money, and you never lechatchila had any kinyan in any flax at all. You gave money for the flax that he would get, and now he's giving you back double the amount of money for that flax that he got and sold for you. Over here, it's going to look like ribis. And it's regarding this that Rav said that it will depend on that buyer. When the buyer paid for that flax, who did he pay it for? If he paid it for Rav Kahana, then it has nothing to do with his seller. Then you're getting the money from that person directly. But if it has to do with if that person did not know about you, then you're getting the money from this seller, from the seller itself, and therefore it will be like ribis, looks like ribis, and therefore Rav says it's not allowed. Okay, this it's interesting halacha. I think this is something which actually is probably very practical regarding today when you invest in shares of a certain company, and then the price goes up, and then you get back in return, and you're not taking back in return the actual product of the company. You're getting back the money of those shares that you're investing in. So it's derech mekach, but it can look like ribis when you invest, and then you get back more. I'm not saying any specific details, but I'm sure it's relevant to the way business is done today and the issue of ribis. This Mishnah begins sort of a new subject. Before we learn the Mishnah inside, let me just say the basis of this Mishnah is the psukim in Parshas Vayikra and in Parshas Nosai, which speak about a person that stole, and then not only he stole, but afterwards, when he's accused of this, he swears falsely that he doesn't have it, and then after that, what happens is he wants to come to do tshuva, and he admits he's meidev his vadus chatasam that he stole it. So now the halacha is, this is what's called Asham Gezelis. We say every morning before davening in Ezel Mekayman. So now he has to pay back the principal of what he stole. He has to add another fifth as well, Chaimish. And besides that, he has to bring a carbon asham in order to have a full kapara for stealing and swearing falsely. That's what this Mishnah speaks about here. So you steal from your friend a value, it has to be at least a shava pruta. You're not allowed to steal less than a shava pruta, but to be chayav this asham gzelas has to be at least a shava pruta. And then the nishbaloi, you swore falsely about this, so now the halacha will be you pay the keren, the chaimish, and the asham. If when you're paying the principal of what you stole, you have to bring that money to this person, to the nigzal, wherever he is. You have to travel to him all the way to Madai. If you want to be able to get your kapara by now paying a chaimish and now bringing a carbon asham, step one is to give back the keren, the principle of what you stole, wherever in the world this person is. You can't return it not to the person's son, not to a shliach. Can't return it in any kind of way like this. Aval, however, there is another exception. What you could do is naisen l'shliach bezdin. You can give it to a shliach of the bezdin, which will hold it. The bezdin will hold it for this person, and then it's considered like you return it to the person himself. And now you can get your kapara. You'll pay also a chaimish, and the chaimish does not have to be given to him directly, and also the carbon asham you'll bring. Rashi over here says the fact that you can give it to the shliach bezdin is a special takanas chachamim to make it easier for this person to be able to do tshuva. Because if to travel to Madai will be extremely expensive, and it's even more expensive than this whole money that you stole here, the person will say to himself, I'm not spending all this money to travel to Madai for this purpose. So chachamim made a special takana that you can give it over to bezdin. That's Rashi's pshat in the Mishnah. If the person you stole it from died, you have to give it back to the inheritors. Nasan loy as a keren. If you already paid the principal directly to the person himself, but v'lei nasan loy as a chaimish, you didn't pay him himself the fifth that you have to pay additionally. Or machalay ala keren. If the person you stole it from, he forgave you for the keren, so you don't have to pay that. V'lei machalay ala chaimish, but he didn't forgive you for the chaimish that you do have to pay. Machalay al zeh val zeh. He forgave you for both. You don't have to pay me not the keren, not the chaimish. Chutz mipachis shavet pruta. Now, if when he was meichel you, but he left out a tiny drop, which is less than a shavet pruta, and he says that I want you to return me, bekeren, even of the principal itself that you stole. In all these cases, because there is no shavet pruta of the keren that you owe anymore, so you don't have to go back to the nigzal, to the owner, to pay this. And you could have your kapara with the chaimish and the carbon even without going to him. If it's the reverse, you paid the nigzal, the chaimish, the fifth, but you didn't give him the principal itself. He was meichel you that fifth, but he wasn't meichel on the keren. He was meichel you the whole thing, the whole gzeile with the chaimish. Chutz mishav pruta bekeren. But a value of a pruta of that principal that you stole, he wasn't meichel. Then tzarich leilach achrav. You still have to go and return to him that pruta in order for you to have your kapara. No, another halacha. If you paid him already this principal that you stole, now this person. So regarding the fifth that he still owes him, he now swears falsely. He's stealing this fifth now. He swears falsely that he already paid that fifth that he owes him. So now, besides the fact that you have to give back this fifth that you just denied and swore falsely, you have to pay a fifth of that fifth as well. Just like the original keren that you stole and swore falsely that you have to pay for, now this chaimish becomes the keren. This is what you just denied, so you're going to have to pay that chaimish and then a fifth of that fifth. The Mishnah says this will continue. Let's say then that fifth of the fifth that you now owed, if you deny that and swear falsely, and then you admit, and now you want to pay the fifth of the fifth, you're going to have to pay the fifth of the fifth with a fifth of that. And this could continue going, and you have to pay this until, as long as what's left here to pay is the amount of a shavet pruta. But if what you're denying is less than a shavet pruta, then you don't have to. This entire halacha that we're speaking here regarding a gazlan applies to a pekadin as well. When you had a deposit that you were keeping for someone, and then you're stealing it for yourself, you deny that you have it, and then you swear falsely, and then you admit and you want to do tshuva. So the same halachas apply. Keren, chaimish, and asham. Shenema, as the pasuk says in Parshas Vayikra, that oy bepikadin, oy b'sesumas yad, oy begezel, oy esek, oy ashak esamitay, that is, oy matzah aveda v'kichish ba. You denied it, v'nishbal sheker, and then you swore falsely. So the Torah there says you have to pay the arezel mishalim, keren, v'chaimesh, v'asham. You pay the principal and a fifth, and then the carbon asham. Okay, so the Gemara here is going to explain the source of what it says here in our Mishnah, that when you pay here the principal of this gzeila, you have to give that principal directly to the nigzal himself. You can't give it to anybody else. Nishbaloi. So the Gemara says, when did the Mishnah say this halacha that you have to pay the nigzal himself if you swore falsely? In this case, you swear falsely and then you want to do tshuva. Over here, the halacha is you have to pay it to him himself. Then we say this is the halacha. But now loy nishbaloi, that would seem from our Mishnah a regular gzeila. You just want to return the gzeila and you didn't swear falsely. Loy, it's not your responsibility to give it back to the owner himself. You can give it back to someone else for him. Says the Gemara Mani. So who's our Mishnah going according to? Leit Rab Tarfon, v'leit Rab Akiva. It seems like our Mishnah would not follow not the opinion of Rab Tarfon and not the opinion of Rab Akiva. Why not? The Tanya or the Tanan, this is a Mishnah that says Gazal echad mechamisha. Person steals from one of 5 people, but ve'eni yideya me'eze mehen, he doesn't know who exactly is the owner of who he stole from. V'chol echad, each one of these 5 people comes and claims oisi Gazal. I'm the one that he stole from. So who are you going to return? You want to do tshuva now and return the item to the real owner. Who do you return it to? So you don't know who it is. So maniach gzeila b'neyam. You just put down the gzeila on the table amongst them. Umistalik. And then you did yours and you can go away. Divrei Rab Tarfon, this is what Rab Tarfon says. And the Rishonim discuss whether any of these people are allowed to go and take this money that you put there between them, because none of them can really prove that it's theirs. But Pashtus, the halacha here would be that none of them are allowed to take it. It's until we figure out who the true owner is. But as far as you're concerned, you did your obligation to return it when you placed it down in front of them. Rabbi Kiva says, "Lo zu derech mitziyasim midei aveda." This is not the way to get the person out of the aveda that he did. If he doesn't know who he stole from, so not only he stole, but he doesn't have the responsibility even to know who he has to return to. No, it says responsibility. He has to give back now what he stole to each one of these people separately. That's what it says here in our Mishnah, in this Mishnah. So here you see a machlekes between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Tarfon, whether it's your obligation to give it back directly to the person you stole from or not, or you could just put it there and allow them to figure it out on their own. Now the Gemara understands that this Mishnah there is speaking about any case, a case where the person swore falsely, a case where the person did not swear falsely. It doesn't make any distinction. So therefore the Gemara asks, Mani, who's our Mishnah going according to? Rab Tarfon. If we were following Rab Tarfon's opinion, it seems Rab Tarfon holds, Afagav de Ishtaba, even if the person swore falsely about this gzela, and now he wants to come and return it. So Rab Tarfon said, Omar, Maniach gzela b'neim mistalik. You still don't have to give back the keren directly to the owner. You can just leave it there and let them take it. On the other hand, Rabbi Kiva, if we're following Rabbi Kiva's opinion, it would seem Rabbi Kiva holds even in a case where the person did not swear falsely. Rabbi Kiva is saying that the tshuva of a person, it's your responsibility to give it back to the owner in every case of gzela, not only in the case of our Mishnah when you swore falsely about this. So who is our Mishnah that says specifically when you swore falsely, then you have the responsibility, if you want to have the kapara of the karban asham, to give it back directly to the owner? So the Gemara is going to try a few options here. It says the Gemara Loilam Rabbi Kivi. The first option is the Gemara says we can say that our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Kiva. The whole Braisa here, what is it speaking about? And when Rabbi Kiva, when he says that you have to give it back directly to the owner, that is only if the person swore falsely about this. Hu de ka'amar, that's when Rabbi Kiva says you have to give it back directly to the owner. My time, man, what's the source for this? Why don't I say this by a regular gazela? Why do I say this only when you swore falsely? Because the Amakra, the Pasik, when it speaks about this, the person that swore falsely, it says, La'asher hu lo yitnanu b'yom hashmasai. The one that it belongs to, that's what you have to return the keren to. So the Pasik makes it very clear, Dafke, in this case, that you have to give it back directly to the person you stole it from. That's according to Rabbi Kiva. Now, why does Rabbi Tarfon disagree with this? We have here Beferish Pasik. Says the Gemara, Afal Gav de Ishtaba. Rabbi Tarfon is arguing in this Braisa in the case where you swore falsely, and he says, even though you swore falsely, Ovid Rabbanan Takante, nevertheless, Chachamim instituted that you shouldn't be obligated to do this. You shouldn't have to go directly to the owner because in some cases that will prevent the person of doing tshuva. And he compares this to the halacha that we saw of what it said in our Mishnah, according to Rashi's Pshat. The Tanya, as we learned in the Braisa, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Tzadik said, Takana Gedoyle Eskinu Chachamim instituted regarding this person that swore falsely on a gzela, and he really has to give it back directly to the owner. Shem Haisait Sa Yisera Ala Keren, that if the expenses of traveling all the way to the owner is more even than this principle, this money you have to return, then Mishalem Keren V'chaimish LeBezdin. You can bring it all just to the Bezdin, and it's considered as if the owner received it through the Bezdin, and then maybe Hashamim Eskapala, he can bring his carbon and he has his kapara. So Rab Tarfon holds similar to this takana that they made in such a case. Here as well, they made this takana that this person is allowed to just give it. In this case, we stole from 5 people, and he doesn't know who to return it to. He could put it down on the table and let them take it. But Rabbi Kiva responds and says, Ki over the Rabbanan takante. When did Rabbanan make this kind of takana that you won't have to give it directly to the person you stole it from? Hechad yad leman gozle. Only if you know who it is that you stole it from. So the money is going to end up back by its original owner when you give it to the Bezdin. Gazal, Echad Mechamisha. But if it's a person that stole it from one of 5 people, and you don't know who it is from, and if you're going to do like what Rab Tarfon said, the original owner is never going to get back his money, then in such a case, Rabbanan did not make a takana that you could just put down the money on the table and walk away. That's the case that Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Tarfon argued about. The Rishonim actually say, according to what the Gemara is saying now, the conclusion of the Gemara here, that really the Mishnah can go both according to Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Tarfon. Because really Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Tarfon would agree that when you swear falsely, you have to give the keren directly back to the owner. Elamai, they're arguing regarding such a case when there's 5 people and the money is not going to get back to the real owner when you're putting it on the table. It's in this case that Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Tarfon argue whether they made a special takana that you're able to put it down on the table to have your kapara or not. But in the case of the Mishnah, Rabbi Tarfon would agree that you have to give it back to the real owner. But the Gemara asks on this pshat.
That foul, she gives to the Bezdin and
Huh?
doesn't know who to give.
No, but it doesn't help though. Putting it on the table, giving it to the bezdin is the same exact thing. According to Rabbi Akiva, the real owner is not going to necessarily end up getting it. The five people that are arguing over this. So in such a case, Rabbi Akiva says it's not enough. You're going to have to pay each one of these people to make sure that the owner gets it. Mos of Rav Huna bar Yehuda. Rav Huna bar Yehuda asks on this pshat. What's the basis of this entire pshat? That the machlokes of Rabbi Akiva and Rab Tarfon and the Braise is regarding the case of our Mishnah. When a person stole and swore falsely, and the pasuk says that you have to give it back to the original owner, is there an exception to this where Chachamim made a takana when you can't give it back to the original owner, that you can just put it on the table? So it's, the Braise is speaking about a case where the person swore falsely. So he's going to ask that we can't say that's what the Braise is talking about. Because we have another Braise that says as follows. Rab Shimon ben Elazar said, Rab Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva did not argue al shalokach echad mechamisha when you bought something, not stole. You bought something, an object, from one of five people, and now you don't know who the seller is. In such a case, there's no argument. Everybody agrees. You pay for what you bought, you put down the money between them, and you can just walk away and let the true seller get it. Let them figure it out. Where's their whole argument? If you're a gazlan, if you stole, and you don't know who you stole from, Rab Tarfon says even in this case, you can just leave the money there and let them figure it out. And it's in this case that Rabbi Akiva says that you have to pay each one of them because you're doing an Aveda. The only way to get out of this Aveda is you have the obligation to pay each one of them. That's the distinction that this Braisa makes. Says the Gemara now, if, like we said before, this Braisa is speaking about a case of a person that swore falsely regarding this money that he owes, like our Mishnah. That's what we were comparing it to. If so, mali lokach, mali gaza. Why should there be any distinction if you swore falsely regarding money that you owe because of something that you bought, or you swore falsely regarding something that you stole? It's the same thing. You're a Baal Aveda. You swore falsely. So in both cases, Rabbi Akiva's opinion should be the same, that you should have the obligation for your tshuva to give it back to the right owner. Another question Rava asked on this pshat, that this Braisa is talking about a case where the person swore falsely. There's a Braisa that says the following. There was a Maisa with a Chassid, Shalokach Mishnei B'nei Yadam. He bought from two people, and then he didn't remember who he bought from, and now he didn't know who he has to pay. This Chassid came to Rab Tarfon, and he asked Rab Tarfon what he should do. So Rab Tarfon says to him, just put the money down and let them figure it out. Then Bolofnei Rabbi Akiva, the Chassid came in front of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says to him, no, the only way you can pay properly is if you pay each one of these people that could be your seller, but you have to pay both of them. Says the Gemara, if the case over here is that this person swore falsely, the whole argument of Rabbi Akiva and Rab Tarfon applies only in a case where the person already swore falsely about what he owes here for this thing that he bought. Chassid mi mishtaba b'shikra. If it's a story with a chassid, then how can we say that the case is that this person swore falsely? How are we calling him a chassid if this is a person that swears falsely? Now the Gemara says, if you'll argue and say the mishtaba, that maybe originally he was a balaveda, he swore falsely, then v'hada have a chassid. Now he did tshuva. He's about tshuva, and therefore we're calling him a chassid now. So maybe it's still the case of this brayso that he swore falsely. But the Gemara says that can't be because we know anytime you have in a brayse and it says the expression that there was a story with a chassid, who is this chassid? Oy Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, oy Rabbi Yehuda ben Rabbi Loi. It's one of these two. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, Rabbi Yehuda ben Rabbi Loi, chasidim nemeikara havo. They were chasidim from before. They're not bali tshuva. They were always chasidim, and therefore it can't be a situation where he swore falsely in the beginning. So the braise that we brought before cannot be such a kind of case. So the answer we said before to compare the braise to our Mishnah, that it's a case where the person swore falsely, like our Mishnah, is not true. Ella says the Gemara, another pshat. La'olam, really I'll tell you, Rab Tarfon that our Mishnah goes according to Rab Tarfon. Now what was our question? Rab Tarfon in the braise said you don't have to give it back directly to the owner. You can just put it down, and the right owner has to figure it out. They have to figure it out between them. Says the Gemara, but Rab Tarfon Rav Tarfon would agree, heiche de ishtaba, in a case where the person swore falsely, that you have to give it back to the true owner. Okay, so what the Gemara is saying is now the exact opposite. Really, this Braisa is talking about a regular gezela. Regarding a regular gezela, there's a machlekes of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon whether it's your obligation to give it back to the right owner when there's a suffix who that owner is. But in a case where you swore falsely, there Rabbi Tarfon would agree. Rabbi Tarfon would agree that you have to give it back to the right owner, based on the pasuk that we brought before. My time that you have to give it back to the right owner. But on that, Rabbi Akiva argues and says, Afagav Doloi Mishtaba. Rabbi Akiva's chiddush in the Braisa was that even if you did not swear falsely, nevertheless, konis, Chachamim imposed a penalty that you still have to make sure that you give it back to the right owner. In this case, where you don't know who it belongs to. So our Mishnah can go both according to Rabbi Akiva and even according to Rab Tarfon. But the Gemara asks on this, with Rab Tarfon, now you're telling me that Rab Tarfon is making a distinction. According to Rab Tarfon, it depends. If the person swore falsely, you have to give it back to the right owner. Otherwise, you just put the money down there. Let's see. In a case where a person swore falsely, the only time where you have to bring a carbon, the whole halacha of praying the keren, the chaimish, and the asham, that's only if you admit it afterwards to the fact that you swore falsely. As I mentioned before, the pasuk says, "V'izvadu es chatasam." So if so, my area v'nishba. So then, if the case over here is that the person is admitting what he did wrong, so then you can't make a distinction whether the person swore falsely or not. Even without swearing falsely, it should be, if he wants to have a kapara, once he was made and he's coming to do tshuva, so if he wants to have that kapara, he should have to give it back to the right owner, even according to Rab Tarfon. As we learned in Abraisa, Rab Tarfon himself says this, Tanya, Maide Rab Tarfon. Rab Tarfon admits regarding this case where you stole from 5 people and you don't know who to return it to. Or a case of 2 people. He says, I stole from 1 or 2 people, I stole from one of these 2 people a mana, any day, I don't know who it is. So then he should give each one of them a mana for this. Let's just finish it in. Because he is admitting, he's coming to do tshuva. If he's admitting himself to this, so then in this case, he does, if he wants to be Yaitzer, Rashi says, Yidei Shemaim, and he wants to have a kapare, he will have to give back to each one of them separately. So therefore, how can you say that according to Rab Tarfon, we're talking over here about a kapara that the person wants? And still we're saying that according to Rab Tarfon, there's a distinction. If you swore falsely about this, then you have to give it back to the right owner to get the kapara. And if not, you don't have to give it back to the right owner. If you're coming and admitting you want to do tshuva, then Rab Tarfon himself says that lotzis yidei shemayim for the kapara, you have to give it back to the right owner. Hello, my Rave. So the final pshat here is Rave says that really our Mishnah has nothing to do with this Braisa. This Braisa is a situation where we don't know who the Nigzal is. Shani Masnisin, our Mishnah though is different than the Braisa, the Kiv in the Yad Alaman Gozle. In our Mishnah, we know who the person you stole it from is. So it's a different story. Va'oidile, and you're maida that this is the person you stole it from. So Kiv in the Efshalah Dura Memayna Lamare, since in our Mishnah you know exactly who you stole it from, and you could give back the money to that person. So then in our Mishnah, even before you give it back to that person, Havale Keman the Amale Yiu Li Biyotcha. Over here, it's as if even before you return it, you were already maida. What does it mean if you were already maida? You're basically telling the nigzal, the owner here, that this money, I stole it from you and I'm holding the money for you. It's in my possession as a pekadon and I'm holding it for you. So therefore, hilkoch, therefore we say regarding the case of our Mishnah, nishba, if the person swore falsely about this, afagav the ka'amale li biyotcha, even though he already admitted and he's holding this money for the owner as a pekadon. So it's like he returned it already because he's just holding it for him as a pekadon. But in a case where he swore falsely, kivin de baye kapare, if you want a kapare for what you did, in such a case, you're going to have to deliver it directly to the owner's hands. It's not enough that you're holding it as a kapare in your hands. However, if he did not swear falsely, so since in our Mishnah the case is that we know who the owner is, you don't have to return it to the owner himself in order to be mekayim the veheshiv, to return it to the owner, because have a gabei pikadin. Once you admitted and you're telling him, I'm going to give it back to you. I'm holding it on as a pekaton for you. So then you already return it. Ad asir b'shakale. So until the person comes and picks it up, it's a pekaton. The case that Bava Kama and Bava Tarfon are arguing about is in a case where you're not holding it as a pekaton for the true owner because you don't know who the true owner is. So you can't be holding it as a pekaton for them. Over there, they're arguing whether you have to give it back to the true owner or not. That has nothing to do with our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, you know who the owner is and you're already returned it the moment you admit. You're holding it as a pekadon. But nevertheless, the Mishnah says, in a case where you made a shua sheker and you want to have that kapara, you're going to have to give it back to the true owner.